It's been an amazing experience being a tauira on the program and just reflecting on my 4 years living in Palmerston North, moving from Tamaki Makaurau, where I live, where I was born and raised in Māori-Art, and coming down here for 4 years to be a student on the course and sort of launching into understanding my passion and interest in Māori art and taking it to another level. But I suppose I was really fortunate before I came to the program to have already worked on 3 meeting houses under Tohunga Whakairo Paki Harrison. And I wanted to just acknowledge that mātauranga and that sort of profound experience for a 19-year-old, or 21-year-old at the time, and then it sort of set me up for understanding that this was my path, I suppose. And the mātauranga in Māori art was sort of opened up for me through his guidance and his leadership, and through working on these meeting houses. So I came to the course with this type of understanding, and as Bob rightly points out, it was a real challenge to try and think about how I might amalgamate that mātauranga with these very innovative, challenging, contemporary considerations that were being offered through this idea of thinking about art history at large, but also what it might mean for us as Māori. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure that out. And my time on the course was 97 to the year 2000. And this was one of those noho that you would do at the beginning of the year. I think we're at Ngāti Te Kunenga, and Huhana is looking after us on this occasion. So that's one of the very few photos. This is pre-digital, guys, so trying to do this was like, oh man. And then trying to find photos and taking photos of photos. But yeah, this is part of the crew and the ope that I came in with in 97 with Ngātai Taiapa, Denise Tohiariki, Rewa Tangira, Rana, what was Rana's last name? Maraikura. And we had a couple of other people that came in years that followed, that were part of that group. But, you know, for me, coming to the course and really thinking critically about Māori art and dissecting it the way that you do in 106, 206, 306 was pretty profound. And it was a real eye-opener because it was, you could start to actually see all the different shifts to Māori art over time that were introduced or that were being responded to by the times that we were living in. And it was a real, quite revelationary, because then I could start to unravel my own, you know, decolonising of Māori art and the different shifts to its development. We're not seen as a negative any longer, or not seen as a sort of an imperative, but we're actually part of its development. So, you know, when you're at the centre of your view of your world, you get to shape it differently when someone's telling you what it is, or feeling like you're being reactionary to someone else's understanding of who you are. And I think that, in a nutshell, is what the course taught me. And then that got really challenged when I left here and went to Elam, and got my first D. So I challenged the theory program at Elam because you would do theory and it was 20% component of your overall masters. And I challenged it and said, oh yeah, there's no Indigenous theory. And at that time, Linda Tuhiwai-Smith was a huge beacon of direction and leadership and lifting the lid on how we might centre ourselves in those conversations. And I remember using that as a platform to talk about it. But also, it was a way of speaking back. You know, how do we reclaim a space to speak in the academy that's very Western and that's often shaping our experience of knowledge. And so I contested the D, and I sat with. He didn't expect me to know Linda Tuhiwai-Smith, by the way. And so I actually went with my twin sister, who's a good colleague of Linda's, we went and met, I showed her the report, she goes, that's not what my work's doing at all. And I said, oh cool, so we met with this guy, Peter Shand, who led the theory program, and I contested the mark, and long story short, we were able to reassess it because with my twin, who's a bit more articulate and scary than me, realised that there was something to be reassessed in terms of how he viewed what I was presenting in my theory presentation. And so, ironically, the following year I get an A- for theory. It's like, oh, this is a joke, you know. We went from getting a D and you not accepting my view of thinking about some of these ideas to now getting an A-. So what I realised in that activity was A, that knowledge is contestable and that our way of seeing the world is valid, and our job often in the education arena is to, the challenge is to be more articulate with what that means and how it operates. And I think that experience by and large taught me to be more articulate about what I was interested in, how to frame my argument about Māori knowledge being central. And I suppose set me in good stead for the next chapter of my career, which was really about, as an artist, writer and curator, thinking about how we centre our stories without needing to be dependent on other frames of knowledge to validate it. And you know, when the gaze is squarely yours on the world as opposed to reverse, it's amazing how empowering that position can be and can be felt. And the ripple effects of how that type of proposition of positioning has on everybody else. Long story short, I fell into curating, doing my first show in a small community gallery space in 2004 in Pūrehuroa, and sort of was a bit out of frustration because I was thinking some of the shows that I saw were really crap. And I thought, well, instead of moaning about it, like we all do, I might just have a go at it myself, and so I did. And then I started to realise that, oh, curating is a form of authorship, and it's a way of presenting ideas and engaging with something in a way that felt more authentic to me. So for me, the course was all about centering our own understanding of who we were and what was important to us. And in a way, I just took that approach to another level with the Toioho, with the last show Toi Tū Toi Ora at the Auckland Art Gallery. And that exhibition was a chance to sort of centre a Māori worldview in a way that was speaking back to the Academy, was speaking back to these frames of art history, and was speaking back to always us being the second conversation in the room to being the first. And when we're the first conversation in the room through our eyes, what does that look like and how is it understood? And I feel like that's partly its success. And I think that's all I really did with Toi Tū, but do it on a grand scale where the pieces of the puzzle, where the stakes were higher, but to be quite honest, it was the same proposition about centering ourselves in our own story. So the Māori creation story became this really founding and profound way to think about that and to present that story, but also to unify Māori artists across generations and across medium and across different diverse influences into one complete whole. I think part of the conundrum of colonisation is it tries to dissect us in ways that we look odd to one another. And I think part of being at the centre of your own conversation is that you see yourself as a complete whole, but you see your culture in that way too. And I think that's part of its success, is that it showed that quite saliently and really powerfully, not just for Māori to see themselves, but everyone else. And I think that's one of the things that I didn't anticipate with the show, this big survey of contemporary Māori art, was that non-Māori were having a profound experience with that idea as well. And so for me, that sort of says not just what's good for Māori is good for everybody, but what's unique to being part of this land and to the stories of this land here in Aotearoa are also partly what shape non-Māori, whether they like it or not. And I think the show's success and its resonance with non-Māori is part of that whole proposition. You know, Māori art history is the only history that's actually unique to this land. And I think that's what bears out in the show and its success and sort of highlights its importance. And I think the other thing is, you know, having been a curator and an artist and connected with you all across different generations through lots of voluntary work, to be honest, things like being on Te Atinga, things like being a quiet student and a listener and taking the time to do the work, which isn't glamorous and it's just hard work, but people only see all the flashy bits. But it's the groundwork that you do with relationships across the board that allow you to do things like this, but also allow you to see the movement differently. So I think about all the different artists that have a link to the program that were in the exhibition. I think there's something like 20, 30, over 30 that have either done the undergrad or the postgrad program, and that have some type of association with the movement of the Toioho program and its approach to thinking about, I think, our positionality to the conversation of Māori art has been quite profound. And it's sort of littered throughout that show, whether you're a teacher, a student, or a graduate, or have been influenced in some way. The impact of the program has probably been one of the most powerful contributions to contemporary Māori art over the last 30 years. And I understand what I'm saying when I say that statement. I think it's very true, and I think we're allowed to own those types of statements, you know. But I also feel like the other sort of powerful development for contemporary Māori art over that time was the arrival of Māori specific curatorial roles. That's had a huge impact, even though they're very few and far between. For the longest time, there were only two by definition, one at Te Papa and one at the Auckland Art Gallery. And those only came on board at the Auckland Art Gallery in 1999. So it's quite recent when you think about it, but that type of authorship within institutions has allowed a range of different types of presentations to take place, and Toi Tū is part of that legacy as well. And I just want to acknowledge, 30 years is a long time, and I know there's different people from across that period in the room, but we have, that first intake in 1995, and Makarita Yonke is here with us today, and she represents one of those very first students that enrolled. Whether she was forced to do it or not, we'll find out later. And then, of course, we have the very first graduate of the program, and Hannah Smith, in the audience, and that's in 1998. And then just the successive generations of artists. It was a trip last night to be here to see people from across that spectrum, and then to realise I probably know the first 10 years max, and then the next 20 years are all new to me. So I'm very well aware of its legacy and how many people have been involved in that story, and I'm just really proud to be part of its very early beginnings. And there's so much to talk about that I can't wrap it up in 10 minutes, but feel free to have conversations today and tomorrow, and the conversations today and the curatorial will help, I suppose, remind us of the power of the program, but also our connections to one another. And the documentary Toi Tū Toi Ora, which was part of this big project, which will be shown twice today, is a chance to sort of just to see what goes into a big show, but see the politics of some of that as well. But also to have these beautiful moments where Chelsea Winstanley, the director and producer of the documentary, has been able to be brought into their trust and to watch them make, and then to check in with them, and Mātauranga Collective and their collaboration with Maureen Lander is a beautiful part and thread that's told in the doco, with that really beautiful crescendo moment in Venice. So, yeah, I suppose, it's really humbling to sort of think that, like Bob says, you think someone's reaching out to get the milk, but they're wanting to acknowledge you. That says a lot, really. I think it says it all. That, we can do whatever we think we're doing out there in the world, but keep your feet on the ground and remember that giving back, and I think that's a very educational ethos, this idea that we give back to one another and to the next generation is really what the game's about. Because we need those next leaders and voices to do the heavy lifting soon. Because we're all part of a way of making a contribution in our own time. But if we're doing it right, we've seen ourselves connected and making sure that we bring in the next group in to allow them to do the challenges that they need to do and to seize in and of their time. But yeah, make the most of the time together. I'm happy I could be here, and I think part of the program's legacy is your understanding of service. So as a student or as someone who is compelled to give back when asked, it's not a big ask, to be honest. It's a real privilege to be part of that history and to be part of its future and thinking about how you continue to do that.